You learn a lot about a place when you're the only one in it. You learn its language. Most buildings, they hum. A soft, electric lullaby. This place holds its breath. 30 years, I've been cleaning these floors. I know every creak, every groan of the elevator. But there's another sound in this building. A sound that doesn't belong. For 30 years, I've worked the night shift, mopping floors, emptying trash, listening to the secrets buildings tell when they're empty. Most buildings just hum, a gentle electric sleep. But the Sterling Tower, this place is different. It's got a hungry kind of silence. The story the old-timers tell is that this building doesn't just have ghosts. It has a termination policy. They say a man was erased here, and he's still trying to get his job back. I never believed it, of course. To me, it was just another floor, another set of cubicles, another night of pushing a broom. I'd walk these empty halls, a king in a silent, carpeted castle. The only ghost I worried about was my own reflection in the dark, floor-to-ceiling windows, a tired old man staring back at a city that never slept. I was comfortable in the silence. I thought I knew all its sounds. My mistake was thinking it knew all of mine. The first time I heard him, it was subtle. I was on the 14th floor, the accounting department. It was dead silent, just the squeak of my mop bucket's wheels. Then I heard it. A faint, frantic tapping sound. Click, clack, clack, clack. The sound of a keyboard being used by someone in a hurry. I froze, listening. It was coming from a cubicle at the far end of the row. I grabbed my heavy maglite, my heart starting a slow, heavy drumbeat. I crept down the aisle, the sound getting clearer. Click, clack, clack. I rounded the corner, raised my light, and nothing. The cubicle was empty. The computer was off, the screen a black mirror. The chair was pushed in. But the sound had been so real, so close. I stood there, my light cutting through the dark, and I could still feel the residual energy in the air, the frantic, anxious echo of a man desperately trying to meet a deadline that would never come. A few nights later, I found the memo. I was emptying the recycling bin next to the main copy machine when I heard the machine whir to life on its own. It hummed, it clicked, and then a single sheet of warm paper slid into the output tray. My breath hitched. I picked it up. It wasn't a test page. It was a corporate memo, perfectly formatted, but the text was wrong. It was a single sentence, repeated over and over, filling the entire page. My work is not finished. My work is not finished. My work is not finished. And at the very bottom, in the space where a name should be, there was just a dark, inky smudge, like a fingerprint that had been pressed down too hard and for too long. I crumpled it up, my hands shaking, and threw it in the incinerator chute. But I couldn't throw away the feeling. This wasn't just a random haunting. This was a ghost, with a grievance, an employee who refused to accept that he'd been let go. I had to ask Manny, the old security guard who'd been here since the building opened. We shared a coffee in the basement security office, surrounded by a wall of grainy monitors. I told him what I'd found. He just nodded slowly, his eyes sad. "That's Arthur Pike," he said. "Poor bastard." He told me the story. Arthur was a mid-level analyst on the 14th floor, a quiet guy who lived for his job. In the big corporate restructuring of 3, his entire department was made redundant. Arthur was fired. He didn't take it well. The next day, he came back to the office, slipped past security, and hung himself in the supply closet at the end of the hall. "The company buried it," Manny whispered, his voice low. "Cleaned it up before the morning shift even started. Wiped his name from the servers, boxed up his desk. It was like he never existed, but he does. He just doesn't know he's been fired. still trying to prove his worth to a company that erased him. Knowing his name made it worse. Now, he wasn't just a noise. He was a person. The activity escalated. The typing was constant. Lights would flicker on and off as I passed his old section. One night, I was watching the monitors in Manny's office while he did his rounds. I was watching the camera for the 14th floor hallway when the screen fizzled with static. For a split second, a face resolved itself out of the noise, staring directly at the camera. It was a man's face, unremarkable, with thinning hair and glasses. But his expression was one of desperate, pleading anxiety. It was Arthur Pike. He was looking right at me, his silent, static-filled face begging for something I didn't understand. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving just the empty, silent hallway. He knew I was watching. He knew I knew. And now, he was trying to show me something. The fear started to fade, replaced by a strange, heartbreaking pity. I started to watch him. I'd stand at the end of the hall and just observe his nightly routine. First, the typing. Then, a faint, shimmering outline of his form would appear, walking to the copy machine. A few minutes later, it would drift to the water cooler, then back to his cubicle. He was a ghost, trapped in the perfect, mundane loop of a dead-end office job. He was still working, still trying to be a good employee. He would even pause by the frosted glass of the manager's office, as if waiting for approval that would never come. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a demon. He was just a profoundly lonely man, so terrified of being forgotten, so defined by his job that even death couldn't make him leave it. He was the saddest thing I had ever seen. One night, the routine changed. The ghost of Arthur finished his work, but instead of fading away, he drifted slowly down the hall. He stopped in front of a small, unmarked door at the very end of the corridor, the supply closet. He didn't try to open it. He just stood there, his flickering form facing the door, a silent, spectral sentinel. A wave of intense cold and despair washed over me, so powerful it made me dizzy. This was the place. This was where he had ended his life. He wasn't just showing me his work anymore. He was showing me his final, desperate act. He was showing me the source of his pain. He stood there for almost an hour, a silent, sorrowful monument to a forgotten tragedy, before finally fading away into the cold, sterile air. The next day, I got the key from maintenance. My hands trembled as I unlocked the supply closet. It was filled with old boxes of paper, dusty binders, forgotten office supplies. I felt drawn to the back corner, behind a stack of obsolete computer monitors. There, tucked away, was a single, unlabeled cardboard box. Inside was everything that was left of Arthur Pike. A cheap plastic trophy for top salesman, a framed photo of a smiling woman who must have been his wife, a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Dad," and at the bottom, a single sealed envelope addressed to management. It was his suicide note, a desperate, rambling plea begging them to tell his family he'd been laid off, not fired for performance, so they could get his severance. It was a note that had never been delivered. They hadn't just erased him. They had erased his last words. I couldn't give the note to the current management. They wouldn't care, but I knew what I had to do. That night, I went back to the 14th floor. I sat down in Arthur Pike's empty cubicle. I turned on his computer. It booted up to a generic corporate login screen. On a hunch, I typed in his name, Arthur Pike, as the username. And for the password, I typed "work is not finished." The screen flickered, and the desktop opened. His desktop, untouched since 2003. I opened a new document, and I started to type. Employee record, Arthur Pike, a dedicated and valuable member of this team. I wrote about the sales trophy. I wrote about his family. I told his story. I put his name back into the system. I made sure that somewhere, in the cold, digital heart of that building, a record of him existed. I made sure he was no longer erased. As I typed the final word, I felt a change in the room. The oppressive cold vanished, replaced by a gentle, neutral warmth. The frantic energy was gone. I looked over my shoulder, but the ghost was gone. I hit save, logged out, and shut down the computer. For the first time since I started working there, the 14th floor felt truly, peacefully silent. I went back to my duties, mopping the floors, emptying the trash. The building just hummed its normal, gentle song. Arthur Pike finally got his severance. He was remembered, and he was finally able to clock out. I still work the night shift at the Sterling Tower, but I'm not a king in a silent castle anymore. I'm just a janitor. And every night, when I pass that supply closet, I give a quiet little nod. A small acknowledgement from one night shift worker to another.